This is the drone Renaissance. The attack surface now includes the sky. For the context, we're talking about security, not the military context of the attack surface, which has included the sky since World War I. Drones are becoming more prevalent in commercial operations, civilian, hobbyist, DIY, off the shelf. They're going to be becoming more common, especially if you've been following the news about certain initiatives to push commercialization for drone use. So, my name is Luke Canfield. I have been into drones since the late 2000s, early 2010s, after I watched a grad student in geography present on using drones for remote sensing. He had used a DJI Phantom with a high definition resolution camera to create 3D images of open pit diamond mines in Africa. I spent an entire semester in this 400 level remote sensing course on focusing on drones, how they had been used in particularly China at the time for disaster relief. These were helicopter sized, larger, and they were primarily used for surveys and delivering goods up in these mountain valleys where the roads had been washed out. So I'm from West Virginia. West Virginia is a disaster-prone area. In 2016, we were hit by a millennium flood. And during this, a friend of mine from high school, he was a river guide and owned a DJI Phantom. And he used it to assist the authorities in search and recovery and later recovery operations. So, the purpose of this is to raise awareness of drones as an underappreciated threat. This is all based off of public information. None of the ideas and concepts in this presentation are mine. I'm merely talking about. We see with situations over the past 10 years, ISIS, Armenia versus Azerbaijan, the drug cartels, they're all using drones in rather novel, creative ways. And with recent market trends and developments in technology, the ability to create a drone, if you don't want to buy one, is more accessible than ever and will only become more accessible. And the average determined individual could theoretically, in a weekend, put one together for less than $1,000 just following tutorials found online. So, as a disclaimer, unauthorized hacking is illegal. We all know this. Unauthorized drone use, which includes drones weighing over 249 grams, requires a Part 107 license. Don't do anything illegal. The outcomes won't be good. The FAA likes to fine people. They're very strict, and for good reason in most cases. Bad guys are already doing this, and I think we as defenders need to also be thinking creatively about this. So, build legally, get your Part 107, don't do anything stupid, please. So, to go over some key terms, drone typically means autonomous. It can fly itself, it can operate under its own accord using machine learning or any of the esoteric DARPA technologies, which I clearly know nothing about. I don't think anyone watching this does. And the FAA classifies what we typically call drones as small unmanned air systems or aerial systems. They're remote controlled by a pilot. However, with software developments, technology, this, that, and the other, through even off-the-shelf drones like DJI, they increasingly have flight path planning software. You can hook all sorts of sensors in, and these small unmanned aerial systems are increasingly becoming true drones. But for the sake of this presentation, I will be referring to these as drones. So I will mostly be talking about perch and stare. These are quadcopters that their real mission isn't during flight. Their flight capability is just to place them and get them into position to conduct their mission, which is the perch and stare phase. They can be solar powered, have a battery and a short lifespan, but they're there to surveil either electronically or with a camera to gather intelligence. And this offers proximity and endurance, which, well, it's persistence. Fixed wing drones, that's your typical airplane drone. They can be VTOL, take off like a quadcopter, land like a quadcopter, fly like an airplane. They also have their advantages and disadvantages. So, reason I call this the drone renaissance. It always starts with a printer. During the classical Renaissance, we had the Gutenberg printing press, which made the production of books less expensive and easier to disseminate. It was less costly in time and gold than paying someone to write by hand. Today, through the internet, hobbyist communities online, and the maturation of 3D printers, you can print a lot of these drone parts out yourself at home. Before, would have required a lot of CAD work, a bulky printer that you had tuned and conducted extensive maintenance on frequently, and that kind of created friction when it came to a lot of what we're seeing today and why it wasn't really done a while ago. So it always starts with the printer, kinda. So what's changed? In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine with their special police operation. The Ukrainians quickly turned to using FPV drones for recon, and later turning them into guided weapons with grenades, RPGs, landmines attached to them. And a lot of this was spurred on by maturation of 3D printing technology. There are connexes near the front lines in Ukraine on both sides with 3D printers and guys sitting in there creating drones. And one of the bigger things that has kind of made this interesting to me is that the online hobbyist communities on Telegram, GitHub, Facebook, Reddit, they've kind of developed their own research and development life cycle. Corporate defense contracting, R&D, typically takes years and is quite expensive. And what we've seen in Ukraine has reduced this down to weeks, sometimes days, with good concepts developed upon, bad concepts either scrapped or sent back to the drawing board. So you too can build a large drone within legal boundaries. 3D printing, this has blown up in the past decade. It is increased significantly in price and capability. And the market is expected to double by 2030. Commercial printers have been around in concept since the 80s. These used to cost around $400,000 up until about the early 2000s, where they dropped down to about $50,000. And today, an industrial grade commercial printer is around $30,000 on average. So consumer and prosumer 3D printers, this is like what we can buy, unless you have a lot of money. A high-end 3D printer from 2015 with near capabilities to a printer like the one I own, like the Bamboo Labs Prusa P1, not Prusa, the P1S, or like the Prusa, I think it's the X3 series. The printer 15 years ago would have cost about $4,000 or more. In 2015, it would have been under $4,000. But today, you can get one with better capabilities that's less of a headache to deal with for about $800, with even better ones with AI integrated that can print hotter, more sturdy materials, getting up to the $1,500, $2,000 range. So this matters because bad guys are already doing this stuff. And lessons learned in war zones have applications beyond a war zone. We need to be thinking about future threats, especially when it comes to our institutions and critical infrastructure security. This is a picture from the locks on the Kanawha River near Marmet, West Virginia. I took this back in 2021 with my DJI Phantom. I was not flying over this. I was well away from it. Now, I don't know how you would use a drone with a, say, Wi-Fi Pineapple or SDR radio to run an attack, because I don't know anything about ICS, OTS. But that doesn't mean a bad guy out there doesn't. And I wouldn't want something perched on the roof of something important, allowing it to gain persistence with that endurance plus proximity that I mentioned earlier. So, continuing about why this matters, drug cartels are using drones mostly for smuggling and contraband. There have been numerous espionage incidents in recent years, the Chinese nationals using drones near military bases. And smaller scale, more petty criminals have been using them to case robberies, counter civil police that see if the cops are coming during a burglary. And in one case, using drones to force law enforcement out of cover and concealment. So we know what the vulnerabilities and threats are with wireless attack. Nothing new. So how are drones that conduct wireless attacks via, say, a Wi-Fi Pineapple running a Kali Pi with an SDR radio or anything, how is that any different? It isn't. The difference is with this threat vector that people have limited attention spans, especially in urban environments. Background noises from cars, HVAC units. People are usually on their phones or making sure they're not bumping into anything. Humans, as far as creatures in the animal kingdom go, have kind of poor senses compared to other creatures like barn swallows or the red-tailed hawk, both of which have knocked my drones out of the air in the past. And this would have been on a clear, sunny, blue sky day, open fields, and from out of seemingly nowhere, a bird comes and attacks my drone. We have a hard time tracking moving objects that are small and at a distance as compared to, say, the noble barn swallow. And like the noble barn swallow or red-tailed hawk, we have bias. No one's going to use a drone to attack my organization. They're going to be in a van parked down the street. They're going to be walking around with a backpack with their gear in it, or they're going to be posted up in like a coffee shop across the street with their laptop and stuff out. Still valid, but it poses risk to the attacker that they'll be seen. There's also the normalcy bias of, as drones become more common, people see drones, it's the realtor taking a video, it's an Amazon delivery drone, it's Uber Eats, they're doing drone deliveries in some places. Or it's the authorities, it's for infrastructure, whatever. And also, I believe it's in-group bias, where no one else cares about the drones flying overhead. So I'm not going to care about the drones flying overhead. So what is old is new, sorta. Security exists in 3 dimensions. Radios typically broadcast out in a 360 with a z-axis. This is an image of a chemical plant in West Virginia. Bottom is Weigel, covering the area. There's tons of wireless access points. Anyone can go on here and look. You can go war driving yourself, upload this, or you can go war flying with a drone equipped with the proper payload. So this facility has very good physical controls. They inspect vehicles going onto the premises. They have fences. Most of the major equipment is on an island. However, there are all these white tanks. Now, do they have security cameras on top of them? Maybe. But that would be an ideal place to put a drone with a solar panel. So what do you get when you take a drone, cross it with a microcomputer, a solar panel, and an LTE modem? You get the Zidane, which is nicknamed the one who waits from a Russian meme. I believe it's of the weird walrus-looking creature. I don't understand Russian humor, but I digress. So these have been popping up in Ukraine, and they primarily have been self-placing landmines or signal repeaters or other drones to boost range or for just persistent surveillance. This one in the picture appears to be made out of PVC pipe. It probably has a 10-watt solar panel on it, and it's most likely a signal repeater. And if you weren't in a war zone and keeping an eye out for this stuff from above, you would think that that's maybe a piece of equipment that belongs on top of that water tower. And as every piece of art has its defense contractor imitation, the British have come up with the Viper. This is a quadcopter. It's a perch and stare, except this one can actually flip and press itself and attach itself to the side of a building or any acceptable surface via suction cups, adhesives, and it even has a heating element to melt the adhesive so it can take off and replace. It has all sorts of equipment on it for monitoring electronically or visually, and it's controlled over a 4G, 5G modem, and I believe it also can be controlled over Starlink, which that's something the Russians have been working on too. So there have been, I believe, 3 cases where a flying Wi-Fi pineapple has been used with a drone strapped with a Wi-Fi pineapple. Brett Locker was talking about this last year, and Glitch Tech over on Twitter was talking about this all the way back in 2018. Eastern Financial, they had some weird activity on their network. They traced it back to a drone, well, a pair of drones that were parked on the roof near their HVAC. They carried a significant amount of equipment on them. This was a costly operation, mostly because they used a DJI Matrix 600 Pro, which is about a $10,000 to $12,000 drone, typically used for filming and cinematography. So, was this budget necessary? I don't think so, which gets into DIY projects. I've said what can be done with a drone is limited only by the laws of physics and the imagination. What I mean by that is, what do you want it to do? Where do you want to do it? How far away are you wanting to do it from? How are you going to control it? You can't beat the laws of physics. If your drone is too heavy, it either won't take off or it's going to burn most of its battery life getting into place. Mean takeoff weight is the maximum weight that your drone can take off at. You have to think about batteries. Batteries add weight. In the lower right picture is my war driving setup using a Raspberry Pi with a GPS dongle and a cheap Wi-Fi adapter. It has an LTE hat on it. And it weighs just under 20 grams. That's not a lot, but factoring everything in, every gram counts. So how can you build one of these? You need a sufficient 3D printer with enough print surface volume area. CAD software to make modifications because you need to make it your own. You can get janky and do some stuff like the Russians did with PVC pipe, but it helps when you can modify things to your fitting, especially when it comes to aerodynamics and weight. And most of these STL files for drones, you don't need to make them, but you can download them and modify them. Flytory drones are pretty good. Find some on Printables, Thingiverse, Maker's World, Cults 3D. And a lot of the components that you can find aren't that expensive, and you can get them on Amazon. You can go down to Micro Center if there's one in your area and get most of what you need. Or you can get a soldering iron, some wire, and burn your fingertips off. Maybe accidentally stab yourself in the leg like I did during this project. And make a drone that can do a lot more for order half the cost of many commercial drones that you would buy put together off the shelf with a lot more freedom using things like ArduPilot, SpeedyBee flight controller, or if you want to spend a little bit more money, get a Orange Cube Plus. That's one of the flight controllers I have. It has a lot of capability, and it can be used for drones of all sizes for integrating all sorts of sensors to automate a lot of its flight patterns. So my current project, I have been building a VTOL warflyer / perch and stare. You can carry a larger payload, greater range, depending on like what I'm wanting to do with it. This is a Flytory Stallion V2 at the top, and below that is a Titan Dynamics Avenger. Unfortunately, Titan Dynamics quit selling their files to hobbyists because of ITARs and government contracting restrictions after they got a military contract. But I managed to get this before that, and this has been my pet project for a while now. So I'm doing this because I want to sort of bring attention to this. If Dmitry and Orlov can do this in a war zone in a Connex box, worried about artillery fire or hostile drones, then a guy comfortable and warm in his home office and workshop can also do this. It has been a learning experience. I would encourage everyone to undertake some kind of project along this line. I've done more soldering and electronic works than I've done since I was probably a kid, taking radios, VCRs apart and putting them back together and having parts left over and it's still working. To create a project, to show you all to raise awareness. And this has been very fun for me, other than stabbing myself in the leg once by accident. Proper safety, always do that. Don't cut down and towards you. That's all I'm saying. So we get into the challenges of dealing with drones on the defense. You can't use signal jammers like the Ukrainians and Russians do in a war zone, because the frequencies that drones operate are typically on the frequencies that everything else operates. The FCC frowns upon this. Don't use a signal jammer domestically. Nothing good's going to happen. Don't shoot drones down. I know a lot of people talk about this. It's actually a felony, and local law enforcement isn't going to take kindly to you discharging a firearm in a public place if you're in an urban environment. Now, Farmer Brown out in the sticks, he might take a pot shot at it or something. I haven't been in that situation because I've typically told people that I will be in the air, usually with my DJI Mini Mavic. So I haven't had any issues with that. Drones are small. It is hard to pick them up on radar. Acoustics can usually pick up drones. Radio frequency detectors can usually pick them up. I have an Ultra SA I've actually played around a little bit with. Drones typically have an EM spike when they take off. But the issue with radio frequency detection and acoustics, if you're in a noisy environment like an urban area where many organizations are, you're going to have a hard time detecting. This is one of the areas AI might become handy with, is drowning out, filtering the background noise out. And using high resolution cameras equipped with machine learning to detect drones. Drones don't move like birds. They don't move like larger aircraft. Forensics with drones, this is a real challenge. And I'm actually going to be doing a longer version of this presentation in a few weeks, and I'm going to talk a lot about forensics with drones. The forensics for drones is kind of uncharted territory right now. There are companies that do that. They're very expensive and boutique. And there isn't anything like autopsy or sleuth kit or any of that for doing forensics on drones. It's hard to trace the operators. You're supposed to register your drones and do everything legally. Well, bad guys aren't going to do that unless they're dumb. And may God bless us with more stupid bad guys. But currently, it's hard to gather actionable information from drones. Drones collect all sorts of information on their internal workings, and you end up with these massive CSV files every time it records the propeller speed every 2 seconds. 10, 20 minutes of flight time is going to take a while to get through, and you might not even get anything great out of it. There are some tools being developed that are on GitHub that you can use. There's traditional tools. And the forensics on a lot of the drone stuff, like I've been talking about, you're going to be doing forensics on the payload. This should be your Raspberry Pi, Raspberry Pi companion computer, the Wi-Fi Pineapple. And that's much easier to do because it's oftentimes typically just running forensics on a Linux system. but I'll be uploading another version of this presentation in a few weeks on that. Drones are going to become more normal, going to add a lot of cover for bad guys with their drones to slap a reputable sticker on the side of your device, and people might ignore it. So, not all bad. What we can do, depending on your location, if you're not in a noisy area, you can use an RF scanner like the Ultra SA and treat these as rogue access points and do what you're supposed to be doing. Now, physical checks, just do routine visual patrols. Add a few extra CCTVs on the roof. Every now and then have someone go up on the roof to make sure the things that are supposed to be there are, and the things that are not supposed to be there aren't. So, a bit about me. I have an international studies and geography degrees from WVU. I focus on intelligence and national security and geographic information systems. I got into cybersecurity back in 2020. I had been doing program planning analysis, supply chain management, procurement, done some QA work, done some buying work, did a lot of vendor management, and I was supporting a cybersecurity information assurance team. And I got on there. I went and got a bachelor's and master's degree from WGU to kind of legitimize myself. And before all that, I was an artilleryman. I did hazmat response, and I was a bouncer at a bar. And that is this presentation. Thank you for watching.